Hello, everyone. Chris Berg, political director for all of Nexstar Media Group affiliates. And you are joining a political power ranker where we track the movers, shakers, and rule makers from our state and federal government. Joining me, as always, the man with the answers to all our questions, Spencer Kimball, the Emerson College Polling Director. And we just call him here for short America's Pollster. Hello, Spencer.
I appreciate it, Chris. It's nice to be high above the Boston Common here today, taking a look at North Carolina.
Yeah, we are looking at North Carolina, and we're going to just make sure people are clear. You are above Boston Commons, not high above Boston Commons, because marijuana is legal in Massachusetts. So, yes, North Carolina, big state. It potentially is the tipping point for balance of power in the Senate. It is one of the states that the Democrats have to flip in order to make that number closer to flipping in the Senate from a Democratic-run Senate to a Republican-run Senate as it is now. So first issue at hand is, where does the race stand? We've got two candidates basically have cleared the field. Michael Whatley, former co-chair of the Republican National Party, and Roy Cooper, former governor of the state of North Carolina. And if we can see those numbers here, they both have cleared the field. So this is what it looks like right now from Spencer's poll. Spencer, tell us a little bit about the poll.
Well, Chris, as we went into the field, Whatley had just announcing his candidacy and Roy Cooper had announced his candidacy. So Cooper has a bit of an advantage jumping in a little bit earlier. And what we see here is a competitive race, but leaning towards the Democrat at 47%, which is a good sign because obviously, as you said, for the Democrats to win back the Senate, they got to pick up probably North Carolina and Maine and then flip one or two other states. So this is a must win for the Democrats if they're going to flip the Senate. And right now, they're in a strong position out of the gate.
Roy Cooper, being a former governor of North Carolina, gives him a ton of name recognition right out of the chute. Let's go to Russ Bowen, who is our reporter on the ground in Raleigh, North Carolina for our Nexstar station there. Russ, tell us a little bit about what you think of these initial numbers and what you're hearing and seeing as this race really kicks off this week.
Well, I mean, the Democrats got their dream, right? I mean, they had hoped and hoped and hoped that this would happen because they see this as certainly their best chance of making this happen and flipping the seat. I mean, Roy Cooper, as we've talked about before on your show, has not lost a race since 1986. That's the state legislature on to winning statewide elections 4 times for attorney general, 2 terms as governor. And this is during a time when Donald Trump won the state in his last election. So there's great recognition in this state as far as Roy Cooper is concerned. And he also is known to be able to, get things done with a very powerful GOP state legislature. The GOP is the majority in both the state house and the state senate. So you can't get anything done without, agreement with both. Now, not to say they didn't override some of his vetoes. That's very true. But as far as name recognition is concerned, he's got to be at the top of the list of pretty much anyone until you start putting in sports figures like Michael Jordan. Michael Whatley on the other side, not particularly well known unless you're within, you're within the circles of the party, you're within GOP leadership or you're a political geek who's been, who watched every single movement in the last couple of elections that Donald Trump was involved. I mean, Michael Whatley ran the North Carolina GOP for 5 years. He moved on to co-chair and then chair the Republican National Committee. He's largely credited with helping Donald Trump win our state 3 times in a row. But yet again, we've had Democrats who won that statewide gubernatorial race all 3 times. Name recognition definitely not there for Michael Whatley with most voters. So getting out of the gate and getting his face out there, doing some door knocks and public events is going to be vital. I mean, Tom Tillis said it just the other day that he's got his work cut out for him because he's just not a recognizable feature. I think one thing that may play in his favor is the fact that, as you mentioned, the deck is cleared. So bye March primary. I mean, there may be a few candidates who remain on the Republican side because there are a few, but they're very unknown candidates that may force a quote unquote primary. But this means they can start to get getting to know you immediately. I mean, what are we, 14 months from the general? So there's lots of time, and both of you guys know how much money they're going to dip into North Carolina outside the state and inside the state to try to keep this seat as far as Republicans are concerned, and Democrats to get the seat.
Right. Let me ask you a couple quick questions because we've got a name recognition slide here coming up next. But on Whatley, you said he helped Donald Trump win the state 3 times. Tell me, what did he do that allowed what infrastructure did he create? What is he good at that allowed a Republican to win? It was close too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the priority was to get into the rural counties. We have 100 counties in North Carolina. 80 of them are considered rural, and that's where you win. But the motivation to get people to vote is where you have to really work your butt off all over the state. Because if people tend to think, well, this race is already won, Donald Trump's going to win, we know it, why bother go vote for him? You're in trouble. And so his ground game, he understands how to execute a ground game. He understands how to organize the ground game, not to mention the social media aspect, not to mention, getting Donald Trump here multiple times. He had incredible crowds to show up every time Donald Trump was in the state. It seems like every month or so we were seeing him, and that was the case while he was before he was president, while he was president, after he was president, and when he was running for president. So getting him on the ground here was a big part of that too.
So he brings that to the table, a guy with a plan. He knows how to win. Saw that in the presidential side too, where he helped Donald Trump win the White House. Flipping it over to Roy Cooper, well-established name, but pretty good fundraiser too. He hit the bank right out of the gate.
That's right.
With a big haul.
Yeah, within 24 hours, he'd raised $3.4 million. Based on all our research, that's certainly a record here in our state for a Senate race, beyond question, really. So yes, but I think part of that too is that people anticipated this. They thought it would happen. It took longer than they wanted it to happen, perhaps. When I sat down with him back in December as he was leaving the governor's office and asked him, what are you going to do next? And, he mulled over a couple of things and talked about what we would all do, talk to my family, think about how I can best serve the public, et cetera. We were all under the impression that we'd know by March or April, and here we are at the end of July, finally finding out. But so I think, to that point, that the money has been sitting there and just waiting to be dropped into his account or his campaign's account as soon as the announcement was made. But Michael Whatley, he knows how to raise money too for candidates, for actual candidates. It'll be interesting to see if he can do it for himself, but he may not really have to do it as much as other people are going to do it for him,
Right. So, Spencer, we've got another slide from your poll. This is favorable, unfavorable for each of these candidates, and the current sitting Republican senator incumbent who is not running again, Tom Tillis. Talk to us about the slide.
Well, as Russ was saying, the name recognition is a great advantage right now for Roy Cooper. He's at 51% favorable, and he's getting 47% of the vote. And when you break into those numbers, he's got that Obama coalition backing him right now, younger voters, minority voters, postgraduates. And we're going to see if he can hold that together, because when you look at Whatley, he's only got 17% favorable, and 2/3 of the people either are unsure or never heard of him. So he's got to make and define himself to the voters. Cooper's already there. And now we're going to see him define himself. We're going to see Cooper try to define his opponent. And obviously, we'll see what happens over the next, 15, 16 months. But starting out of the gate, Cooper's got strong name recognition and positive name recognition. Remember, he's like a +20. Whatley's got a lot of work to do, but he's only down 6 points in the polls. So he's still competitive even at this disadvantage. As voters now learn who he is, let's see if that moves the needle for him over the next year.
Russ, your impression of this slide.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, from Spencer, how much of that is about the red or the blue on the ballot versus knowing the person, how you're going to vote, because this happens every time, right? We get closer and closer to the actual election. The undecideds get narrower and narrower, but they're the ones in our state who do decide the election, and they're typically the unaffiliated voters. So a lot of people are locked in. They don't care who's on the ballot. The question is, how do you get those people in that yellow part of that graphic that you just showed to make a decision? Or these people who just aren't engaged yet because, they've got election exhaustion, as we can totally relate to and understand. Spencer, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, getting out your vote is going to be motivational by who the candidate is. So we're going to see how much enthusiasm Whatley can bring to events and how much voter excitement, and then what the issue of the campaign is going to be. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when we get into those issues. But those are what get voters excited, maybe the personality of the candidate, but Whatley doesn't seem to be that type of candidacy. And so he's going to have some policies. With that said, Cooper's at 47. He's not at 51. And so there's still room for a lot to be swung here because they don't know Whatley. But on the flip side, he could also go down. So yes, he might go up because he's a Republican in North Carolina. But as people learn, and Cooper comes out and tries to define his opponent, he's not going to say all the good stuff about him. And so we're going to see what voters, when they make up their minds over the next year, if they swing in his direction or not.
Yeah, I certainly think when we see the ads come out, when we see, these two candidates or their surrogates out on the stump, it's going to be about Cooper's record since 1986, because he's got one. I mean, he's got a record, like it or not. You can find plenty of stuff there to go up against or put out a rah-rah for. But when it comes to Whatley, he has no record, but Democrats are already attaching him to Trump's record, to the president's record, because he's a major supporter of Donald Trump, major supporter of what Donald Trump stood for in the first term and what he is standing for in this particular term, and that's an easy attack as far as Democrats are concerned, especially when in their hopes of grabbing some of these unaffiliated or undecided voters.
Real quick on each of these candidates. Give me 2 words for each of these candidates, how you would describe them right now, or even one, just what comes to mind.
2, I'm going to have to give you 3 words.
All right, go ahead.
Roy Cooper, guy next door. Michael Whatley, I don't know him.
And that's where they sit right now.
Yep.
In North Carolina.
Yep.
That works. All right. Now you talked a little bit about Donald Trump and that Trump factor, the Biden factor. We've got Spencer, you have another slide here that kind of indicates a little bit about where Donald Trump stands in North Carolina.
Yeah, we had a chance to ask the name recognition and approval of some of these candidates. Obviously, we just saw on that previous slide. Here, Trump is somewhat favorable, 46-44. Josh Stein, the governor, is very favorable, 41-25. And if you look at that spread, both of them kind of align with their vote totals back in 22 and 24, or back in 24 for both of them when they won by 15-3. So they're holding ground from where they were. And, some places having that Trump endorsement might be enough to give Whatley that edge in the election. On the flip side, people in North Carolina seem pretty content with how the Democrats are running the state, and they might give Cooper the edge in that case.
Anything surprise you here, Russ?
No, and I want to give you a little deeper insight into this as well, because I talked a bit about the GOP being in control with a supermajority in one chamber. They do not have a supermajority, but they do have a majority in the other chamber. So these guys all have to work together, right? And I think both sides have been good at commending each other when they need to and really going after each other when they need to as well. One thing that Josh Stein is very good about is, think of his first 2 weeks in office, was it? Who was here with him, standing next to him in the disaster zone in Western North Carolina? Donald Trump. And who do you see a picture of him standing next to just last week? Linda McMahon. That's, we're talking about the Secretary of the Department of Education saying thank you for releasing the money. So don't tell me that there's not some strategy there in terms of wooing over some of these Republican voters, perhaps, who are, not as much into Donald Trump in perhaps 14 months as they are today. And I think it's savvy on his part. And I think we're going to see a whole lot more of it. And I will say Roy Cooper played that same book for a very, very long time.
Spencer, you want to add something?
we saw that in the numbers. The Republicans only have a 39% disapproval of Stein. Normally, the opposition party would have like an 80% disapproval. So he's made some significant inroads with Republicans. He's got a 25% approval amongst this group. So he's clearly made inroads with the opposition at this time.
Yeah, and I think he's doing better with Republicans as a governor than Roy Cooper did.
Well, guys, we've got to take a quick break. Everyone, you're watching Political Power Ranker. We're Spencer Kimball from Emerson College Polling and Russ Bowen from the Nexstar affiliate in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're talking North Carolina politics, a key state in 2026. We're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break. Coming up next, issues that may decide this election in North Carolina. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker. You are watching Russ Bowen from our North Carolina affiliate in Raleigh and Spencer Kimball, the polling director for Emerson College Polling. And we are talking North Carolina politics 2026. Emerson has got a new poll out about the candidates and a bunch of issues. And Spencer, we're going to jump right into what's the most important issue North Carolinians are facing right now? And talk to us about what you're seeing compared to 24.
Sure. So obviously, when you look at this chart, the economy is still the top issue. And if you notice, it's a 5-point drop from back in the November election. And what we see is an increase. If you look at housing affordability, it's up 6 points or down again 6 points. So we're seeing a shift away from that economic concern. And the issue that kind of pops up here is threats to democracy. And if you remember last week, we were talking nationally, we saw threats to democracy increase on that scale. Here in North Carolina, we see that same issue percolating amongst voters.
Russ, let's bring you in here. Looking at this slide, what's your takeaway?
Well, I think, when you talk about the threats to democracy, perhaps we've evolved in how we define that since January 6th, those years ago, right? Like, what do we see today that some people would conceive as a threat to democracy? Perhaps it's this latest investigation to Duke University, one of the most renowned universities in the country, one of the most renowned health organizations in the country, being investigated by the Trump administration and, having funding withheld. Does someone see that as an example of a threat to democracy? So I think this is very, very, very much a part of the conversation with people in the grocery store and walking your dog. What do they see as what they fear is next, what they worry about is next? And then you've got folks who say, good, go, find this out, get down to the bottom of the DEI issue, all of these sorts of things. But I think the threat to democracy question has a different, the answer has something else behind it than what it did, perhaps if we asked that question last year. I don't know, Spencer, if that's the kind of take you're getting on this.
Well, that's exactly. If we go to that next slide and we start digging into those crosstabs of who's saying what the top issues are, look at the Democrats. 33% are saying threats to democracy, but that's not where the Republicans are. They're saying, hey, it's the economy. Look, only 6% of Republicans are saying it's threats, but then you have those independents, and the independents see threats to democracy as the second biggest issue. So they're more in alignment with the Democrats on that, and I expect to hear more of that in the 2026 election cycle. In 2024, to your point, it was a much more split. So remember, we're quantitative, we're looking at the numbers, we look in those crosstabs, and we see back in 24, Democrats and Republicans more equal about threats to democracy. They had different definitions of what it meant, but they were more in line. Now it's definitely a much more Democratic issue, and the Republicans aren't really speaking about it at this time.
And then, when you talk about the economy, that is in central North Carolina, particularly around the Research Triangle Park area, Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area. That's a big, big concern right now because of the grants funding and NIH funding. We've seen
pretty much all of our research institutions, which are some of the best in the world. I know I just love North Carolina and all our research folks and our and our universities. And, I can't help but give them a big plug. But yeah, I mean, they've seen some of this funding cut off. So people have been let go. We've had people let go at Research Triangle Park. NIH has 30 some facilities. The only one outside the greater Washington, D.C. area is in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. So we're seeing a direct impact from that and some nervous folks. What's that's going to do to the housing market that, frankly, is really, really full of inventory right now. People just are not buying. And then there's this talk around town now referring to it as brain drain. There's this concern that people will leave because of a threat to their job. They're worried about their job. They lost their job, and they take all of that brain power and they take all of that education. They go somewhere else, and that spending power. Mom and pop shops are affected. Local car dealers are affected. But then on the flip side of that, we haven't been really impacted by most of the DOGE cuts within the federal government. One thing that we have benefited from, though, with those folks who have been let go from federal posts and jobs, is it's helping our state and local governments fill positions that have been open for a long time with qualified people. So they're seeing people hired almost immediately who are impacted by the DOGE cut, but they're getting jobs pretty quickly, which is helping your small town, your state, and certainly your county governments as well.
Right. And can we go back to that other slide, George, the original slide, because we've seen some shifts and significant shifts in the other big issues, and maybe Russ and Spencer reflect on these a little bit. Abortion access, not as important right now to folks, not by ×3. Education drops in half. Foreign policy goes up. Obviously, Ukraine and the Gaza are big issues going on right now. And then healthcare, is that the big, beautiful bill becoming a little bit more of an issue with rural voters? So any thoughts on those shifts, those small but significant?
I will tell you specifically about, let me talk about healthcare specifically. Okay. So this is one thing that Roy Cooper is credited with, and our Republican-led legislature, is the expansion of Medicaid to 600,000 people who did not qualify or have it beforehand. We're one of the last states in the country to be part of this match. Well, guess what? That is likely going to go away or be hit really, really hard. And who suffers the most? It's the rural counties and it's the rural hospitals. We've had rural hospitals already close in the past. They're worried they're going to end up closing now. You have people who have to drive 2 counties over to get medical care. That's a big problem if you're having a heart attack. And these are the things people are thinking about when it comes to healthcare. And this is what they're worried about. What the state has to figure out is if they can make this work in some way. And you better believe this will end up, in the voters' mind when they head to the polls. So I think if there's a number one healthcare worry in this state, that's definitely it.
Right. Spencer, any thoughts on those shifts?
In 2018, the Democrats had the healthcare issue, pre-existing conditions, ran a very strong midterm elections. In 22, they ran on the issue of abortion and didn't have as strong of a performance. Well, they had a pretty strong performance in that they held more seats than they were expected. But now we're seeing that the abortion issue isn't really being talked about, and they're switching back into the general healthcare conversation, which might be a larger and stronger issue for the Democrats. But we'll see it over time. Obviously, the abortion issue hasn't gone away, but it hasn't been talked about. And we'll see if the healthcare policies that have been shifted with the new bills, if that has an impact on attitudes over the next year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, all of this here could flip upside down. I mean, you could see people really glad, whatever, or happy with whatever the tariffs end up doing or the big, beautiful bill does. We just don't know. We don't know. And it's, we may not know until the middle of next year, frankly, with a lot of this stuff.
Right, exactly. Now, shifting gears a little bit, because Spencer's got some other numbers that are very interesting. And the former vice president is making news this week, and she's involved in some of these numbers. We're looking at the Democratic presidential race in North Carolina right now. Kamala Harris releases a book today. She says she's not running for governor this week. Spencer, tell me about these numbers, break them down a little bit with Mayor Pete on top, even though Kamala Harris has a ton of name recognition.
Sure. So if you think it's hard for us to, read the crystal ball for next year, we're already looking 4 years ahead of that to 2028. But we actually have seen some trends over the last 6-7 months. For example, former Vice President Harris, she was leading those polls back in November, even maybe in February. But we've seen a decline in her support. We saw it nationally last week, and we're seeing it here in North Carolina, where she's dropped into, pretty much the mix of the candidates. Pete Buttigieg, who is leading nationally, has also got a strong showing here in North Carolina, suggesting he's got some infrastructure around the country and will be a strong candidacy if he decides to move forward with that. We do see some split of the vote, like AOC and Bernie Sanders over there. Collectively, they're at double digits, but they're kind of running in that same lane. And then Gavin Newsom, who's a national candidate. I would just say the big surprise here was Andy Beshear out of Kentucky. Even though he's in that middle pack there, that's a little bit higher than what we've seen him in previous polling, and we'll see if those numbers move for him.
Quick thought on that slide, Russ?
I think the Andy Beshear part of that is the most interesting to me. I will tell you, knowing these folks, and I was born and raised in this state, Andy Beshear would play well in North Carolina for Democrats. There's no question about it. I mean, he's won a red state twice. Sound like Roy Cooper. He's won a red state twice. He's out there. I think people just don't know who he is here, but I think once they got to know him, he'd do pretty well.
Now we have another slide. We're going to the other side of the aisle, the Republicans, and no surprises here.
No, again, we're seeing here in North Carolina, what we're seeing nationally. J.D. Vance basically clears the field. Remember, nationally, you have DeSantis and Rubio competing around 9-10 points. Here, they're, in the single digits. So at this point, the Republicans have the de facto would be the vice president, but we're so far away. But it's a good place to at least know where the Republicans are sitting in the race.
Russ, any thoughts here? Any observations? JD to win or lose?
I mean, I think part of that too is people, the assumption, well, the vice president, why would he not be at the top? So I'm going to check his box. I know him well. He's out there a lot. I have an opinion at this point on him. These other folks I don't know as well, even though they're in the news cycle a lot. I think that has something to do with it, and the fact that they see JD Vance as a fighter and a fighter for what Trump and his team stand for, and that's good in the eyes, very good in the eyes of most Republican voters.
Got it. All right, time to take one more break. When we come back, our favorite part of the show: who's up, who's down, according to Emerson College professor of polling, Spencer Kimball, America's pollster. I'm sorry. And we'll be right back with who's up and who's down. All right, welcome back to Political Power Ranker. Now it's time for who's up and who's down. We always start with who's up. Spencer, who's up this week according to yourself?
Well, glass half full is for Roy Cooper. If you look at his name recognition, he's at 51% to 33% unfavorable, which is a really strong start for his race for U.S. Senate.
Russ, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think he's going strong. I would be interested to see what you guys think in another 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, when the ads start coming out, if people decide to change their opinion about him, because they're going to come out, they're going to come out strong against him.
It will be probably one of the most expensive races in the country this year in North Carolina for Senate.
Yeah.
So, all right, now we know who's up. Spencer, who do you say is down this week on Political Power Ranker?
Well, I would look at Senator Thom Tillis. He's got a 30% approval rating, 43% disapproval, and amongst Republicans, he's only a +6. So it looks like the base has kind of left the senator, and it might suggest why he's not seeking a third term.
Russ?
Yeah, he's definitely in that position where people have just moved on and not thinking about it. Now, they will change their opinions and it may go down even more, because most political experts in North Carolina say it'll be interesting what he does for future votes, because he's got nothing to lose. And we see why he's down a little bit, because he's gone with Democrats in some of these votes. So will he do more of that? We'll see.
Terrific. Well, that wraps up another edition of Political Power Ranker. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Russ, I appreciate you joining us
bet.
again. Until then, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.